So today we will be looking at critique of practical reason. Critique of practical reason, that also very in brief, in short, we will be seeing it. We will not be elaborating it too much because our area is to go into critique of judgment. We cannot hang around critique of pure reason and practical reason for so long a time. But we need a kind of foundation, how he develops his theory and how that is applied into his epistemology is being applied into ethics and also aesthetics. That's why we were to understand what is his epistemology. So in his epistemology, in Critique of Pure Reason, what we saw was he is trying to investigate or he is doing a kind of survey of the cognitive faculty of mind. What are the a priori conditions of mind that help a rational being to arrive at a cognitive knowledge judgment? Okay, how does somebody like me and you arrive at a cognitive knowledge, a cognitive judgment? How knowledge is made possible? So that is what he does in Critique of Pure Reason, or his epistemology well describes how somebody acquires knowledge. He is investigating the faculties of mind that are helpful in acquiring knowledge. And he takes this forward to the realm of ethics. And in ethics, what he does is, he is trying to examine whether it is possible to find out, are there any a priori conditions that are helpful to arrive at an ethical judgment, a moral judgment? Are there any a priori conditions of mind that give you a moral knowledge? That is the concern here. So we'll just look at it. Before we go into that, I will show you the names of the books that he has published, especially with regards to ethics. So Critique of Practical Reason is there, but apart from that, there are two more works by Immanuel Kant on ethics. So just have a look at that. They are The Metaphysics of Morals in 1785, Critique of Practical Reason in 1788, and Fundamental Principles of the Metaphysics of Morals in 1789. So these are the three works which are concerned with the moral philosophy of Immanuel Kant. The Metaphysics of Morals, Critique of Practical Reason, and Fundamental Principles of Metaphysics of Morals. So these are the works. Reason may be considered as speculative and practical. Okay, you know what is speculation. So reason has two forms. One is speculative and one is practical. So it is speculative according to Kant when it is concerned with theoretical knowledge. When reason is used in order to acquire theoretical knowledge, or when it is dealing with theoretical issues, it is speculative. And practical when it influences any kind of human behavior. Reason is considered as practical when it influences our behavior. So my reason tells me do this. My reason tells me stand up when some elders come into the room. So it has a practical aspect. When a teacher comes in the school, we have practiced that. Or when you are at home, when your parents or some elders come into the house, if you are sitting there, probably you stand up. That was the way it was earlier. So there is certain reason that prompt us to do certain things. Do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. So that kind of promptings are there. So when the reason affects our behavior, that is considered as practical reason. So it is practical reason is concerned with moral choice and its implementation. So speculative reason is concerned with theoretical knowledge. That is what is dealt in Critique of Pure Reason. And Critique of Practical Reason, Immanuel Kant deals with reason that is concerned with moral choice and its implementation. He is trying to find out if there are certain a priori conditions which help us to acquire moral knowledge or help us to make a moral judgment. That is what he is doing. To stand up when some elders come in, that is by experience. We see others doing it, so we also do that. Or some of the teachers or elders teach us in that way. I have seen when I am traveling in North India, very often elders are respected by touching their foot. When you reach home or when you come out of home, you bend yourself and touch the feet of your parents. So that culture is reared. So that kind of practice is found in several places, but in some other place it will be different. I have heard that in Sri Lanka, in some of the regions of Sri Lanka, I am not very sure. There are people here, if I am wrong, they can correct me. Somebody told me once, in India or in Kerala at least, to stand up when some elders come inside is a way of respecting them. In some parts of Sri Lanka, it is like if you get up, that is an offense. When I get into the room, if they stand up, that is an offense. I don't know whether it is same or, but what I wanted to say is, I am not sure whether I was true or not. Somebody from Sri Lanka may know it, but I have heard this. The point I wanted to make is that such practices can be different in different places, because that is not a priori, but that is a posteriori. It is after an experience that we learn it, we inculcate that habit in our mind, so it cannot be said as a priori. So Immanuel Kant is trying to find out, or he does a survey of the mental faculties or the a priori conditions of the mind that would help you to arrive at moral knowledge. So what could be such a knowledge of, what could be a knowledge of that sort? I would put another example which will be more clear. We know that we ought to tell the truth. Okay, we know that we are all supposed to tell the truth. It is another matter whether we are telling the truth or not. It is possible that sometimes we lie, sometimes we may hide the truth. That is also possible. But as a moral rule, it is true everywhere. We ought to tell the truth. In Sri Lanka, in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, America, wherever you are, any rational being that notion in their mind. It is not because somebody taught them. There are a priori conditions operating in our mind which help us make that judgment. You ought to tell the truth. Or suppose we are having an exam. During an exam, you are not supposed to copy from others. Is copying from others a morally right behavior? Or you are a good student, you study well, you write well, you pass over your answer sheet to your neighbor, somebody who is sitting nearby, so that he can copy and he can pass the exam, he can clear the exam. Is it morally a right behavior? You please respond. Is it morally a correct behavior? Say yes or no. Please respond here. I want to know that you are there. Otherwise I am talking to the camera. How long I can talk to the camera? No matter whether you copy or not, what I am asking is it a correct behavior? Is it morally right to copy? Exam mein chori karna sahi hai nahi? Do you have any doubt? Whatever our behavior is a different thing. Even when we violate it, we know that it is morally wrong. It is morally wrong. Whether somebody breaks this moral law, we all know that everywhere it is same, plagiarism, copying for the exam. There are certain moral human behaviors that we always consider as wrong, yet we tend to violate it. This knowledge is a priori in as much as its validity does not depend on man's actual behavior. Standing up when an elder is coming in, that depends on the culture, that depends on the place where you are, the people among whom you are living, that depends very much like that. But there are certain other behaviors which does not depend on the actual human behavior. You imagine that everyone is copying. But we know, even if 100 out of 100 people are copying, that behavior cannot be considered as morally good. It is morally wrong. That judgment is based on a priori condition of our mind. Standing up when a teacher is coming in, that is a different thing. That is based on the culture, based on our practice. That is a posteriori. And a priori, in case of we ought to tell the truth. Because even if no man tells the truth, it is universally and necessarily valid. So the duty of the moral philosopher, according to Immanuel Kant, is to discover the a priori element in our moral judgment. To discover the a priori element in our moral judgment. That is the duty of a moral philosopher. I hope that theme is clear to you. So when it comes from pure reason to practical reason, what is the difference? So the epistemological method is brought into the theory of ethics. So that is what he does. So he is trying to investigate and find out. He is trying to investigate and find out, or he is doing a surveys of the mental faculties that help you to acquire a moral knowledge, which are universally and necessarily valid. So that is his project in critique of practical reason. And I have one more question for you. Generally we consider certain things as good. Wealth is good. Or our talents. Some may be singing very well, some may be painting very well. So we have talents. Some may be dancing nicely. So these talents, all of them are good. But they cannot be good always. They cannot be good always. Or somebody will be having the ability to study well. Means even by reading, when you are reading a very complicated text, suppose when you are reading Immanuel Kant, in one reading you will get the crux of it. So that's an intellectual capacity. There are very intelligent people. Intelligence, wealth, or possessions. So everything is good. But can they be good all the time? Irrespective of where it is, with whom it is. Can they be good always? So can you tell me when it cannot be good? I have a car. I consider it to be a good. But can it be good always? We have so many possessions, material possessions which we consider as good, which are so dear to us. Can they be always good? We have, in our kitchen we have knives. So are those knives good? What do you think? Are those knives good? We consider the knife to be
good when it is sharp.
When it is sharp, it is good.
Yeah, but when it is like sometimes it becomes when it is not sharp, then we feel that this knife is not in use.
No, suppose if the knife is always sharp, it is always well maintained. Can we say that to be a good thing? Universally and necessarily?
Because it is always usable for us.
Okay. But Immanuel Kant would not agree with that. It can be good only if it is qualified as good. Only under certain circumstances it can be good. When that knife is with your parents, your father, mother, or with you, or with somebody at home, and you are taking it for cooking, you are cutting vegetables with the knife, it is good. But suppose a thief enters your home and he grabs the knife, will it be good? Will it be good? You understand? So it cannot be good always. So any good that we consider as good in the world is mostly not good always. That means for them to be good, they have to be qualified as good. In the sense, there must be certain conditions under which it can be good. In certain other conditions, it can be bad. So Kant is trying to find out, is there anything in the world? Is there anything within human minds? It is not, I spoke of a knife, it's a very material thing. But you consider my capacity to learn. I am very intelligent so that I can learn well. There are so many good students in the class who are studying very well. Can their intellect be considered as something good? Their intellectual capacity, can they be considered as good without any qualification? Some of you are thinking. Very often we say the capacity to learn, the capacity to, or some kind of technical skills, everything we consider as good. But are they always good without qualification? We know somebody who does study very well, he learns things very well, and he gets a job in a bank, and his intellectual capacity he may use in order to do some kind of corruption, some kind of fraud. In that case, it cannot be good. You understand? Any of our capacities, any of our intellectual abilities, our talents, our skills, all of them shall be good only when it is qualified as good. Without qualification, we cannot say as something as good. Yeah, it depends on the context and how we use it, how the end of that capacity, the end of that fact, the purpose of that faculty, the purpose, how do I set my goal? It depends on various other things. It cannot be always good. It cannot be universally considered as good. It needs to be qualified. So Immanuel Kant is inquiring whether there can be something good without any qualification, which can be always universally good. And he finds only one thing. He says, what can be considered good without qualification, accepting only a goodwill. Only goodwill can be goodwill. Only a goodwill can be considered as good always, everywhere. So the goodwill, I hope you understood the term, goodwill ambassador, goodwill. So I will share the screen. So the opening statement of fundamental principles of metaphysics of morals, that is very famous and often quoted, fundamental principles of metaphysics of morals. The opening statement reads thus: it is impossible to conceive of anything in the world or out of it which can be considered good without qualification, accepting only a goodwill. So whatever good you find in the world, they cannot be good always without qualification, except goodwill. That is the opening statement of fundamental principles of metaphysics of morals. It is impossible to conceive of anything in the world or out of it which can be considered good without qualification, accepting only a goodwill. So only goodwill can be said to be good without any qualification. So what does it mean by good without qualification? So any external possessions, our wealth, our belongings, our mental talents, our quickness of understanding, our intelligence, our natural traits like courage. I am very bold and courageous, but my courage can be used to do some evil thing. That is why we say courage is good, but it can be good only when it is qualified in a certain way. But goodwill cannot be evil in any circumstances. So any of our talents, any of our external possessions, any of our natural traits, they can be misused, and hence they are not good without qualification. But goodwill cannot be evil in any given circumstances. It is good without qualification. So in order to clarify this, in order to clarify the notion of goodwill, Immanuel Kant connects it to duty. So you imagine a will which acts for the sake of duty. A will which acts for the sake of duty. And actions done for the sake of duty are called goodwill. Means actions done in accordance with the duty. So one example could be like this. In order that will to be good, he says, you should not expect a gratification. So when you do something, you are telling the truth or you are being nice to your friend. When you have an intention of gratification, or when you be nice to your friend also will be nice to you. So you are expecting something back. But when you are being nice to your friend, or when you are being nice to anybody who is around you, without expecting anything, which is more good. So the goodwill implies, or goodwill involves, that you are behaving nice to everyone without expecting any response, any good from them, without expecting any good back from them. So it is out of duty that I am being nice. Okay, I am duty bound. I am being nice to others just because I am supposed to be so. It is not that somebody must be nice to me, or you are telling the truth. You are telling the truth out of the feeling that you are duty bound to tell the truth. I think that it is always right to say the truth, to speak the truth. That's why I am speaking the truth. There can be other way also. When I tell the truth, people will start trusting me. So when I am, now recently elections happen. So I plan to contest for the upcoming elections. So I will have a trail of being truthful. So I am expecting something back, some kind of reward. At that case, it is not followed by goodwill. But when I am dutifully doing it, even when I have nothing to gain, even when I don't achieve anything out of it, I am being truthful. A businessman being careful not to overcharge his customers. It can be done in two ways. One is business prudence, that if I do not overcharge, he will come to me again. Second, it is my duty. It is morally wrong to overcharge my customers. So I charge only in a fair manner. You understand? So it is based on that he classifies this. What is driven by goodwill and what is driven by some other kind of motives. So goodwill is the only thing that can be good without any qualification. So I don't explain too much about the critique of practical reason, because we need to proceed into the rest of the portion. So Immanuel Kant believes that he can show that aesthetic judgment is not fundamentally different from ordinary theoretical cognition of nature. There are three kinds of judgment. The cognitive judgment, which comes in critique of pure reason, moral judgment that comes in critique of practical reason, and aesthetic judgment, which he discusses in critique of judgment. So he believes that ordinary theoretical cognition of nature and aesthetic judgment are not fundamentally different. And also he believes that he can show that aesthetic judgment has a deep similarity to moral judgment. That is the reason why we consider it as a whole single project. So the project of Immanuel Kant, he himself considers that it could be completed only with these three works. He began with a critique of pure reason. Then he realized that he need to do something more. Then only it will be complete. So he did critique of practical reason. Then he realized that critique of judgment, that project would complete it. Then only the project would be complete. So he goes on to write critique of judgment. According to Immanuel Kant, the epistemology, ethics and aesthetics are all parts of a unified system which are compatible to one another. So it's a unified system. So the aesthetic judgment is not fundamentally different from theoretical cognition of nature or theoretical judgment, and it has a deep similarity to moral judgment. That is the reason why we are looking at all of them, okay, as a foundation, as a basis for which we are now going to see in the coming hours, in the coming lectures. We try to understand what is his epistemology, what is his ethics. So I think this part is clear to you. I am being truthful so that people will like me. But I am being truthful because it is my duty to be truthful. That is the difference. Or even we may consider when I live a virtuous life, I will get rewards for the afterlife. That kind of intentions also actually malign the goodwill. Okay, because I have an intention, something ulterior, something behind the scene. Okay, when I do this in this manner, I will be rewarded at some other place. So he wanted to remove all such propositions. So when you look at, I will make it a little more clear by going into Critique of Pure Reason. So towards the end of Critique of Pure Reason, what you find out is, what Immanuel Kant realizes is that there are certain ideas of God, soul, world, etc. There are certain ideas like God, soul, world, etc. But they cannot be understood by our experience. It is only in the realm of reason we are able to think of them. So, but the issue is the concepts of God, the ideas of God, world, or soul. They cannot provide us with any valid knowledge. It is only a matter of faith or belief. It doesn't give a knowledge. It does not constitute our knowledge. Maybe they can be considered as regulative principles that will help us to organize our practical life. So that is the reason why he is moving on to Critique of Practical Reason. So he is trying to understand, even without the dictates of the religion, there are 10 commandments in Judaism and Christianity, and every religion has its own sets of principles which help us to organize our practical behavior. Whether it is Islam, whether it is Hinduism, Christianity, Sikh, whichever religion it is, Buddhism, there are a certain set of principles which help us to organize our moral life. So Immanuel Kant is trying to find out, or he tries to investigate, and he does a kind of survey in order to find out if there are any a priori conditions of mind which help us to organize our moral life, our moral behavior in a better way, even without the help of any religious dictates. So that is where he goes on to examine this. I think this is very clear now. So we are done with Critique of Practical Reason, and we are supposed to move on to Critique of Judgment, which is more important for us.